Good Tuesday afternoon to you. Hope your day is off to a great start. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, John Fanta will join us. We'll talk Browns as well as some Indians with John. But it is mandatory minicamp day for the Browns, and that's where we begin. They are out in Berea on the field wrapping things up as that first day of practice. We'll hear a little later from Kevin Stefanski about how the first day of practice went. Let's welcome in Mac Robinson. And Mac, one of the things that is great news for Browns fans, Odell Beckham Jr. helmet on, taking part in receiver drills. Just another sign that he's well on his way to recovering from that ACL surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you look at the way that Odell is really progressing his rehab. Seems a little ahead of time when that timetable you're looking at for that ACL. So with Odell, you're looking for that explosiveness and, you know, seeing that helmet on and him, you know, not on the sideline, you know, it's always a positive sign to see him. And, you know, hopefully he's able to come back bigger and better than ever.
And again, want to develop that chemistry with Baker Mayfield as it goes on and on. But a good first step, doing the wide receiver drills, and looks good to go.
Yeah, and especially, too, you know, I mean, this is the first time that we've seen Odell in offseason activities with Baker Mayfield and getting that chemistry down. So, you know, that's a major step looking at where Baker and Odell have kind of come from and kind of, you know, taking those steps along the road. Obviously, you saw Baker towards the second half of the season, you know, really start to hit his stride. And unfortunately, it just came right after the injury with Odell. So, you know, hopefully they're able to, you know, take the progress that Baker had last year and really build upon that. And adding in an Odell Beckham, you know, all of a sudden now, you know, you have that more explosive weapon on the offense that you're able to mix in.
Well, there was media availability for the players before practice, and one of the guys that talked, Nick Chubb, running back who in his final year of his contract, but Nick Chubb made it perfectly clear where he wants to be.
Cleveland drafted me, you know, however many years ago it was, and trusted me and put their faith in me to come here and help build this culture and build this team I've been a part of. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, Cleveland's where I want to be. So I hope everything can work out in that direction. I'm more, you know, I don't like uncertainty, and I know here in Cleveland what I have with the players, the coaches, and just the city of Cleveland. And I don't know, you know, how things will be anywhere else. So Cleveland's where I want to be, and that's my main focus is, you know, being here in Cleveland.
And Mac, I think something gets done with him probably before training camp, because I think he's one of those pillar guys that Andrew Berry talks about.
Yeah, and it's especially interesting case because, you know, you look at Nick Chubb and, you know, all of the analytics people would probably say you don't pay a running back. Obviously, we've seen Ty Gurley and that not work out in the past. But, you know, I look at this case and this offense really doesn't go without Nick Chubb. And he's such a key cog, not only on the field, but also in that locker room. And while he might not necessarily be the most vocal guy that everybody's, you know, picking out, but at the same time, he's such a key integral part to that locker room that I do genuinely think that something does get done. I do think that this is a case where Andrew Berry and company will go ahead, get the job done with Nick Chubb, retain him. And obviously they have Kareem Hunt for a couple more years. So you get that tandem locked up for at least the foreseeable future, at least for the next few years.
Denzel Ward is another guy that the Browns will have to they have a fifth-year option on him, but he's another guy that they're going to have to decide if they pay. Ward talked about all the new guys on the defensive side of the ball, and there are a ton of them, and how quickly they might be able to gel.
I think we could definitely get on the same page. A lot of guys came in kind of early as well to get some work with one another, and we're out there and getting accustomed to each other and the plays and learn the playbook. So I think it'll all come together.
And the addition of a guy like John Johnson III, just what can that do for you and the rest of you guys in that secondary?
Yeah, he's already shown that he's a leader on this team. He's communicating out there, getting guys in position to play, and he's making plays out there. So it's going to be good having him on the team.
And, Mac, it's kind of interesting, you know, couple of OTAs and a mini camp, and already John Johnson viewed as a leader. That's the type of personality he has. Good things for the Browns secondary with John Johnson.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, I look at John Johnson. He was obviously one of those leaders that you saw brought in from L.A. with the Rams. And, he made an impact early and often. Clearly, I mean, he's only 25 years old. And at the same time, he already was one of their team captains just a few seasons into his career. So him coming over, all of a sudden, coming into a new locker room, a lot of times some people might be a little bit, shy when it comes to, that first introduction, maybe taking charge that first day. But, John Johnson coming at it like a savvy vet, coming in, and he has that experience and has that leadership ability to where, at this point, I think that he's going to be one of those key cogs on that defensive side. I think that John Johnson is somebody who can be that stabilizing force in the back end. And, it allows guys like Denzel Ward and guys like, Greg Newsome and even Greedy Williams too, where, they can just focus on their job. They don't necessarily have to worry about being the quarterback on the field. They don't have to worry about, anybody else's assignments. They just focus on their job. John Johnson, he takes care of it over the middle.
So J.C. Tretter, Brown center, is also the president of the NFLPA. He talked about, a lot was made with the Browns, quote unquote, voting to boycott and other teams having significantly better attendance at the OTAs. Tretter made it clear it was a player's decision, personal decision by the players, whether it was more beneficial to attend OTAs or keep working at home.
A bunch of guys reached out to me just to talk through it, and I told them, like, this is your decision. I'm here if you have any questions, but if you feel like it's in your best interest to be there, be there. I don't think there's any pressure, or I'm definitely not mad at anybody for coming. I think we laid that out very clearly. We had our own calls with just players that we can talk about it just as a group, and we made it and we made it really clear that we're a team and there are no hard feelings either way. For the guys that came in and the guys that stayed away, there should be no hard feelings for the guys that stayed away, and vice versa. The guys that came in shouldn't be upset the guys stayed away. This is each person's making their decision that they feel is going to make them the best player. And if we all make that decision and all become back as the best players possible, then the team's better because of it.
State-sponsored media trying to turn the lights down on J.C. Tretter. But to his point, it was position groups, and he explained it a little later, and we'll hear from him more. But different position groups get virtually no benefit out of OTAs, in his opinion.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, too, is that obviously, people talk about, is it helpful to have everybody together? Sure. I mean, it's good to have that camaraderie built up and good to have them, working together, getting to know the personalities, everything like that. But, for certain players, it's helpful. For certain players, it's not. I mean, you look at the offensive line groups, obviously, there were some players that were working out on their own. I know last time that I joined you, we were talking about Wyatt Teller working out on his own. But, Jedrick Wills was somebody who came into camp. And, there were younger players that, wanted to be around that coaching staff, wanted to get some of that teaching from a lot of that coaching staff. So I look at overall what they were able to do. I think that this was an opportunity for some players. For certain players, it was, I can stay away. I don't necessarily have to be there. But, it gave the team a chance to look at some of these younger players and some of these guys who, maybe not make the team, but at the same time, they can go ahead and make an impression and can get some tape out there for themselves as well.
Yeah, and it's a personal player's decision. So national media, get up. Dominique Foxworth talking about the pressure that Baker Mayfield is under. Let's listen to him.
You look at a guy like Baker Mayfield, and while everything is set up, of all the really good young quarterbacks in the AFC, he may have a better team around him than any other. I wonder what you think of the pressure there is on him, considering that and his contract and everything else, to play big this year.
The pressure is high, and it's kind of been unfair what we've been doing to Baker Mayfield because his rookie year, he's a #1 overall pick. Pressure's high. Following year, they stack the roster. Pressure's high. Next year, it's like, is he going to get the 5th-year option picked up again? Pressure's high. Again, this year, people are talking about them as a legitimate contender for the Chiefs, and the pressure is high. I'm not sure any quarterback has started their career with as much pressure as Baker Mayfield has every year. And again, I don't know that it feels like it's unfair to do as a person, but I'm not sure it's unfair analysis. Like, we understand that this team has no real major holes. They filled the secondary issue with some players that they picked up off of the Rams. The only thing that could take them to the next level right now, I think, is a less run-based, play-action-based offense and more Baker Mayfield in the pocket picking people apart. And if Baker's going to do that, then they are just as good as the Chiefs. But I'm not sure that Baker has that capacity in him.
Well, the only thing I would say to that is, again, first time that he's in a system for a second year in a row, and he has a lot better coaching than he had the first couple of years as well.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I look at as well is that, he mentioned it there at the end where, not sure if Baker really has that in him. I'm not sure that we've really had the opportunity to see Baker go ahead and try to do that. Like, you look at Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I mean, you'd be a fool not to give the ball to them at that point. But, they towards the end of the year, they were utilizing the passing game actually to set up the run as well. So I feel like there's ways that you can showcase Baker a little bit better, I feel like, by the end of the year as we saw with that. But at the same time, too, I do think that, he's right to an extent where, the pressure is on for Baker. Because, again, I think that for him, as much as we talk about, Nick Chubb being a key cog in the offense, I think that you look at the other side of things and, Baker at this point, I think that Baker obviously is the one who makes this thing run. And I think that his ability to hit deep and as well as accurately in the short areas, I think that he's somebody where if Baker doesn't go or if this doesn't necessarily work out as well for Baker and he doesn't take that next step, I think that there might be a little bit of struggle. But at the same time, I do expect that out of Baker because of the way that you saw in the second half of the year. As he got comfortable in the offense, you saw the offense evolve and get bigger, stronger, and better.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll dive a little deeper into Jarvis Landry's statement that the Browns are neck and neck with the Kansas City Chiefs. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. We continue talking Browns football. Mandatory minicamp, just wrapping up day one out in Berea. J.C. Tretter, president of the NFLPA, caused a little bit of a stir when he suggested players not go to the OTAs. People felt that the Browns were at a competitive disadvantage because a lot of other teams had almost 100% participation and the Browns really didn't. Well, Tretter said the offensive linemen did get together, did work out, and that OTAs really aren't that beneficial for offensive linemen in his way of thinking.
Yeah, I think we worked out together. A lot of it was just lifting and some drills. It was kind of normally what we would do during the offseason anyways. And then I was out in San Diego for the last 2 weeks. Antonio was out there with me. That's usually where I spend my off seasons as is. So I went out there just to work out and get to the beach a little bit. But a lot of it's just, for my personal decision on the matter, it was really, I know if I go to OTAs at this point, there's really only two things that can happen. One, I'm going to have more wear and tear on my joints. That's not great for me. And two, I have an increased likelihood for a season-ending injury by practicing right now. So both those things aren't good for me, and I would say not good for the team with either of those. I've been somebody who have never felt that OTAs have been helpful for me at any part of my career, taking away the injury I had during it. But I feel when you're in shorts and a t-shirt, I think your fundamentals slip more than you develop your fundamentals in offensive linemen, because you can't really put your shoulder into anybody or you're going to get clipped by a face mask. So you play high. The defense is able to grab your jersey and pull you. You have nothing to grab onto because they don't have shoulder pads. So I think it's not a realistic game-like scenario. And I've always felt worse leaving the offseason program, both physically and with my fundamentals, than entering the offseason program.
And Mac, that's very interesting. Just hearing it from an offensive lineman's perspective, I get what he's saying.
Yeah, and it does make sense for a veteran like Tretter, who's been in the league. He's been around the block pretty much. So it makes sense for him where he's coming from, and especially too, he mentioned the fact that it's important for him not to get that season-ending injury and not to get the wear and tear on the joints. I think it's less important for him to be there, and maybe more important for the guys like Nick Harris, who was the backup center last year, and even James Hudson, the 4th-round pick that the Browns took this year. Getting that coaching from a Bill Callahan and getting that development from the offensive lineman, I think it's more beneficial for the younger players as they can go ahead, get used to working out, obviously getting in the day-to-day routines. But I do think that it might be more beneficial for them. But for the veterans, I'm okay with some of those guys not necessarily being there, because we've seen in the past major injuries and catastrophic injuries derail a lot of or bring up a lot of issues for a lot of teams heading into the season.
Yeah, without question. One of the things you want to get through not only minicamp but training camp is without major injuries to the guys you're counting on. Well, Nick Chubb again talked about being paired with Kareem Hunt and then getting Odell Beckham Jr., who's going through some of the drills today, back in full swing, what that would mean to the Browns.
Yeah, I always think it's more that we can do. I mean, Kareem's an awesome teammate, awesome player. And every year it's great to go out there and play with him. So I think every year it's a chance for us to go out there and show how we can continue to be a dynamic duo every year. Yeah, we can do a lot. I mean, we were that good without OBJ. I mean, we can be, even better with him. And I believe it. I believe he's looking good. I believe he's back to his old self. So I'm excited to see.
Mac Robinson, you got to think with Beckham and Mayfield, if they can get on the same page, good things for this offense.
And that's been the money line. I mean, when we're talking about the last 2 years, if Odell and Baker somehow get clicking and, they get that marriage going, I do think that this offense can take it to a whole nother level. You saw last year what they were able to do when you look at guys like, obviously, Rashard Higgins is one of those key cogs where he can go ahead and be that possession receiver who can just extend those drives by getting those first downs for you. And you have Jarvis Landry as well. But, you were missing that big play threat, that explosive down the field threat in that Kansas City Chiefs game. And I look at Odell, and that's exactly what I would be looking for. Odell was exactly what fit. And you saw in that Dallas Cowboys game early on in the season what kind of an explosive threat Odell Beckham can be. I mean, hell, he broke off a tackle where, he should have been down 7-8 yards in the backfield, and he took it for a 40-yard touchdown. So, Odell is such a game changer for this team, where if him and Baker get aligned and they get right, this team can take it to a whole nother level. And we thought that we saw a phenomenal team last year, and we did. But this team can get that much better, explosive on offense and on defense as well.
Well, the other thing is when you have Odell Beckham Jr., Nick Chubb benefits because you can't load the box. You gotta pull a guy out there and pay attention. The other thing, the other topic that we want to get into, Denzel Ward talked about all the additions on the defensive side of the ball and how important that is for the Browns, and also the thought they're neck and neck with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I was excited about it. I mean, I feel like he made some great moves. The entire organization made some great moves, great additions to the team that could help this team out.
And on Saturday when we talked to Travis Kelce, he said you guys were neck and neck with the Chiefs. Is that how you feel coming off that playoff loss and heading into this year?
Yeah, I definitely believe so. I mean, I don't see why not. I feel we could beat that team, beat whoever we line up against. We just got to do our job, and everything else will take care of itself.
And, Mac, it's not like they're thumping their chests in a bad way. You want the team to feel like if we line up and play like we're capable of, we can beat anybody.
Well, and you know, the adage goes that you take on the personality of your head coach. You know, before, like a couple years ago, you had seen like Browns pretty much everywhere going that we're underrated, we're coming this year, we're going to break out. All of a sudden now, the last year and a half, it's been nothing but, hey, we just got to do our job. We got to show up, show out, and we'll go ahead and everything else will take care of itself. And you look at what's happened. I mean, Kevin Stefanski's turned this team around. And, you know, Denzel was right, honestly, because that team was going back and forth. Now, granted, I mean, obviously you had Mahomes out for the second half of that game, but still, that was also with a defense that was pieced together. And, you know, look, there were talented players in that defense, no doubt, but at the same time, you can't help but realize the amount of talent that has been added in just one offseason. So, you know, all of a sudden now that defense gets a massive upgrade. And now on offense, too, you start to get healthy. You get Odell coming back. And, I mean, that also was missing, maybe 2 or 3 offensive linemen, too, in that game. I mean, a guy named Blake was playing guard, for Pete's sake. Like, you had all of these guys that were down. You're getting fully healthy. Now, hey, it's anybody's ball game, I think. I think that Kansas City, they're obviously the defending AFC champs, but I think the Browns have a shot.
Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll hear what Pat McAfee thought about the Super Bowl comment that Jarvis Landry made. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions. Should I get it? Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. I'm Dave Bacon. Jarvis Landry mentioned the word Super Bowl as in saying, yeah, I think we are a contender for the Super Bowl. Caused some stir. Some people think you don't do that. Take a listen to what Pat McAfee said about Landry's comments about the Browns being Super Bowl contenders.
So Jarvis Landry is asked what the standard is, and he gives out one of the best quotes I have heard in a long time, by the way. Now, this quote leads to people saying, oh, Jarvis Landry thinks they can win the Super Bowl or whatever. It's like, what do you want the guy to say? So he said, people always say you should not talk about it, but nobody trains and nobody do what they do to not be a champion. Like, think about that, though. That's an incredible quote right there out of Jarvis. Nobody's training to not be a champion. We're not supposed to talk about it. So that's the standard. We haven't made it there yet. Every team set out, 32 teams set out at this time of year or any point. They drafted teams to be a championship team. They signed free agents to be a championship team. So why not talk about it? It's real. This comes after Patrick Mahomes basically either was asked or talked about going undefeated. Tom Brady Brady was asked about going undefeated, said that was the one I wish I could get back. And you listen to Joe Thomas talk whenever he was on the Browns. One of the years they won 0-16, actually, one of the only 2 teams in the history of the league to do so. He said, the Lions being the other one, he said, I thought we were going to win every year. Yeah. Every game I thought we were going to win. You have to. So asking Jarvis Landry, a man who is a passionate, competitive leader of that team, like, hey, do you think you have a championship team? What's he supposed to say? No?
And Mac, I would say I have no issue with that whatsoever, with him saying that.
I have no issue either, because to be quite honest, we've had a lot of times where, fans expect these players to go ahead and just give the political answer or just give the non-answer, the coach speak. But to be quite honest, I think that's a breath of fresh air that, I think you or I could go ahead and say that, maybe they should be dialing it back. But if I'm a player, I want to say that, every single game, I should be going out to try to win. Am I going out to say that, yeah, we're going to be 9-8 or we're going to be 10-5. I don't want to get too ahead of myself and say that we shouldn't go undefeated. Like, no, I think that the goal should be to win. Everybody talks about it. And I mean, Al Davis even would say, just win, like, just win, baby. That's the way that it would go. So, I take no issue whatsoever in what Jarvis was saying. And to be quite honest, like I said, I think it's a breath of fresh air that I'm glad to see Jarvis say. And to be quite honest, I kind of expect out of him.
Pro Football Focus ranked the top 10 pass-catching tandems in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce from the Chiefs 1. Julio Jones and A.J. Brown of the Titans ranked number 2. Thielen and Justin Jefferson of the Vikings 3. And Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry 7th. So what do you make of that, Mac Robinson?
I would say this. I think that that's also kind of just the national side of things, taking a little bit of caution with it. Obviously, we've seen the explosiveness out of Odell. We've seen Jarvis be able to play at a high level. But obviously, those guys that are at the top, you've seen the excellence that we've seen out of A.J. Brown last year. We know what Julio Jones can deal. And then on top of that, too, you've got Mike Evans and those guys. I think that Odell and Jarvis, if Odell is able to come out healthy and if Jarvis Landry is able to come out and produce, I think that team and that duo is going to be rising up that list very high. And obviously, too, I mean, the Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce combo, I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, you've got Pat Mahomes dealing out to those guys. I think that goes without saying. But like I said, I think that if Baker Mayfield is able to take that next step, I think that Jarvis and Odell are going to be able to rise up that ranking a little bit this year.
So what do you think could derail the Browns in 2021? What things could really throw a wrench into all the expectations?
I think that for the Browns, a lot of it is going to be just, taking that next step. And I think that, it's all about, obviously, and to bring up coach speak, it's all about taking that next step, and it's all about doing their job. And that's what they were able to do last year. But it's really about growth and taking that next step. And I would say, too, that's what I would look at on the offense. On the defensive side, Denzel talked about it a little bit with gelling. And I think that, that's going to be what I'm looking out for this year. I think that if they're able to gel sooner rather than later, this team can get very dangerous very quickly. Because that defense, obviously, there's a lot of moving parts. Obviously, the opportunity to possibly have 9 new starters this year, it's going to be a lot of turnover, a lot of change. But if they're able to get that working and able to kind of get that underneath them, I do genuinely think that this team could go very far, including the Super Bowl, in my opinion.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll hear what Colin Cowherd thinks about the offensive line and 6 things to keep your eye on at this minicamp. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Sports4CLE continues. We continue talking Browns football with Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Take a listen to Colin Cowherd and what he thinks about the Browns' offensive line for 2021.
Cleveland has the best offensive line in the NFL. That's not under dispute. Right now, it is fantastic. Well, let's go. I think 4 of their 5 players are like high-graded PFF, like top 5. Let's go to the last 5 years, the best offensive line in the NFL. So last year, you can certainly make an argument it was the Colts. So the Colts allowed the second fewest sacks and the second fewest quarterback pressures. What happened? Phillip Rivers won 11 games. He's now retired. Old, immobile Phillip Rivers won 11 games last year. 2019, best offensive line was the Ravens. Ronnie Stanley, Marshall Yanda, Orlando Brown. They had the number 1 rushing offense NFL history, allowed a league-low NFL quarterback pressures that year. What did they do? 14-2. Year before, it was the Rams. Remember Andrew Whitworth, Roger Saffold, John Sullivan, Austin Blythe, Rob Halvenstein, McVay's in town. They ran the ball. Goff never faced pressure. They went 13-3 and lost in the Super Bowl. Previous year, hard to argue, it was Philadelphia. Jason Peters, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Brooks, Lane Johnson, number 1 graded offensive line, Pro Football Focus. Jason Kelsey was the number 1 graded offensive lineman of 2017. They get to the Super Bowl. New England and Belichick cannot stop them. And Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl. 5 years ago, best offensive line, Dallas. Dak Prescott, a 4th-round quarterback, goes 13-3. They had the number 2 rushing offense, the number 5 total offense with a 4th-round rookie quarterback. Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith was giving you 16 games. The last 5 years, you got Phillip Rivers winning 11 games. And by the way, going to Buffalo, and that thing was a fist fight. They moved the ball up and down the field on the Bills. Cleveland's going to win a bunch of games.
And Mac Robinson, it's hard to argue. Offensive line usually equates to a winning football team.
Yeah, and I would say this to even add on to his point. You know, you look at all 5 of those teams that he had mentioned, you know, all of their defenses were always top of the line. That was also another great part of that as well. And you look at where the Browns defense was at last year, it wasn't necessarily the best. And on top of that, too, you know, you dealt with the injuries, you dealt with the different COVID outbreaks, but at the end of the day, you know, the Browns were up there. I think this year they can get that and then some. You know, he talks about the wins coming in. I think now that you have the defense to back up that offense, the offensive line is there, you know, the skill players are coming in. I genuinely think that this team can be even better than what we saw last year and a lot quicker than we saw last year as well.
So let's shift our focus. Mentioned mandatory minicamp. Day 1 wrapped up a little bit ago. 6 things to watch at this minicamp. I'll give you 3 of them, and then I'll give you 3 more. Does everyone show up? Odell Beckham Jr.'s movement and the linebacking pecking order. So let's go through those.
Yeah, so everybody's showing up. Obviously, I think that's going to be the big one because, you mentioned it too with the voluntary mini camps. Browns didn't have the best showing compared to other teams. The Texans and 49ers were just a couple of teams that, canceled their mandatory mini camps because of how good their showings were in voluntary mini camps earlier in the offseason. So because of that, they didn't feel like they had to do the mandatory mini camps. So, for the Browns, I think that it's going to be interesting to see if everybody shows up. And two, you mentioned Odell and his movement. If he's able to move well, I think that could be an absolute game changer because, like we talked about before, Odell and Baker, this is the first offseason activity that they've actually had, period, since Odell came to Cleveland. So I think that's massive for them. The more reps that they're able to get and not have to worry about getting chemistry during the actual season, during in-game action, the better for these two. And then, third, I think that overall for the Browns, what I'm looking for with these guys is really just how they're able to handle everything and how they're able to kind of put things together. Overall, I think that this team can do a lot. And I think that they can go ahead and show a lot for what they've been able to do. And especially, too, we talked about one of the big questions from last year, the linebackers. That linebacking pecking order. I know that you mentioned that. And you have Mack Wilson, who is somebody who, made some plays, but also can be inconsistent. You have Jacob Phillips, who was a high draft pick last year in the 3rd round. And he was somebody who, was very impressive. And I know the front office likes him quite a bit. So combining that with some of the veterans, Malcolm Smith, you obviously add in Anthony Walker, a good leadership player. And on top of that, too, you obviously drafted JOK, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and he looks the part. Obviously, there's no pads on quite yet, but, I'm not going to fault a guy for looking absolutely shredded on the field. So, I think that how they're able to, establish their pecking order with those guys is going to be fantastic because I think that with Joe Woods, he's going to add in a lot more versatility to this defensive line or to the linebacker room, excuse me. And, utilizing certain players, I think that's going to be huge and go a long way, especially.
So the other three, day 3 rookies, so the guys that were drafted later in the draft, the status of the 2020 opt-outs, the guys who chose not to play because of COVID, and the crowd at wide receiver. Let's go through those.
Okay, so for the day 3 rookies, I think that it's a little bit of expectations in managing those for a couple of those guys. So James Hudson, obviously, he's going to be a developmental guy this year. Backup offensive tackle, we talked about him a little bit earlier. But, for some of the guys on defense, I think that, these are guys who are going to be special teamers. Now, you lost some of those special teamers from last year, and Tavir Thomas being one, and, a few others as well. But in order to replace some of those guys, you have a Richie LeCount who was selected in round 5. And he's somebody who can make plays on defense, but he's also not afraid to hit in special teams. Same thing goes for Tony Fields. Now, he had an injury earlier in the offseason. If he's able to recover back in time, that's great. If not, I'll be interested to see how he's able to, play in training camp. But the player that I'm actually really interested to see how he ends up playing is Demetric Felton, the running back / wide receiver. Now, he worked out a little bit at wide receiver down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, and, his route running looks phenomenal. But I think he's somebody who, he can be a kick returner, I think, on day 1. It might not necessarily be a role on the offense per se or a massive role, but I do think that he's somebody who can challenge that Dearness Johnson type of role where he can be that, change of pace back for these guys. And he can be somebody who can return kicks. So I'm interested to see how he's able to play. And then Tommy Togiai was selected in round 4. And he's somebody who, he was starting to develop, this past year with Ohio State. I think he's going to be that nose tackle backup as well. So I think he's somebody who I'm keeping an eye on. And then for the opt-outs, I know that you had mentioned, Andrew Billings is somebody who hasn't gotten a lot of talk this offseason. I was fascinated by his signing last year, and I do think the Browns severely missed him last year because Larry Ogunjobi, and I love Larry. I love what he's able to do and the way he's able to play. However, I just didn't think that for a nose tackle, he had enough of that bulk that you need to take up 2 of those blockers. And Andrew Billings can do that and then some for those guys. So he's somebody who I think can fill those holes on those first couple of downs. And then at that point, it's all out. Now, you had also mentioned the wide receiver room. And that's a group that I'm really intrigued to see because obviously we talked about Jarvis and Odell, But, those latter guys, obviously Kadril Hodge, he was somebody who bursted onto the scene last year and really showed a lot of chemistry with Baker. And on top of that, too, you add in some of these guys on the back end of the receiver room. And I do think that there are guys who can make an impact and who will make an impact in the NFL. I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to make it on this team because of how crowded it is. And I haven't even mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones at this point. So, these guys, it's a crowded receiver room, but I'm going to be interested to see who's able to stand out of these guys.
Yeah, and another guy that opted out to keep an ear out for is Drew Forbes, offensive tackle. Could add some depth.
Good one.
Could add some depth to that offensive line that the Browns are looking for. Well, news came today that, in fact, Sheldon Richardson is not coming back to the Browns, signed with the Vikings. Your reaction to that and what you think kind of factored into that?
To be quite honest, I'm not really surprised. Overall, Sheldon Richardson, phenomenal player. Obviously, I think he's been our best three technique for at least the last decade. But, for Sheldon, he was a great player on the field, but phenomenal leader off the field. And it is a loss for the Browns for sure. However, I do feel like with the players that they've added this offseason, you added Anthony Walker, you added John Johnson. We've talked about both of their leadership qualities already. I think that those guys can be a leader, and especially, too, I haven't even brought up Malik Jackson quite yet. So he's been a veteran in that defensive line room. I do think that overall, they have these leaders that can, fill the void a little bit. Now, granted, the on-the-field play, I think that you're going to have a mix of Malik Jackson as well as Jordan Elliott, who was also selected in round 3 last year. I know the Browns like his play a lot, and I do think that he can go ahead and make a big jump coming into this year. So I think that Jordan Elliott can, fill a little bit of that role for him as that 3 technique. But I do think that overall, you're going to have a mix in of even Jadeveon Clowney, kicking inside, being that speed rusher in that NASCAR package. I do think that, while Sheldon Richardson is a loss, I do think the Browns have done well enough to add enough depth and leadership to where it's not as much of an impact as you would expect from cutting such a great player for them.
What position groups you paying closest attention to in these mini camps as it moves forward? What do you want to look at? What do you want to hear?
So the most obvious one I would probably say is linebacker. We talked about them and, the pecking order for all of those guys. But the one that I'm actually really interested to see is the cornerback group. Because obviously you have Denzel Ward, but you have Greg Newsome coming in as a rookie. You've got Greedy Williams, who missed all of 2020 with his nerve issue. And then on top of that, too, you lost to Terrence Mitchell. You lost some of these guys on the back end. And hell, you started Robert Jackson last year as an undrafted free agent. I want to see how does the depth stack up with these guys, obviously adding in a Troy Hill as well. I'm interested to see how the secondary is able to play out. A lot of great safeties as well that they were able to add. So on defense, I'm looking at the defensive backs probably, I would say. And then on offense, too, I'm always somebody who, tries to catch the offensive line as much as possible. I like watching some of those backups, how they're able to develop and, how they show up against some of these guys. Obviously, we talk about the talent along the defensive line. How do they match up? I still remember watching Myles Garrett's rookie year and knowing damn well that Roderick Johnson, was not going to be playing on the Browns for much longer after seeing him go up against Myles. So, catching those guys, I think it's going to be interesting. And, we talked about the wide receivers, I do think that every single year there's always a couple of guys who are going to stick at least somewhere or at least show out in the preseason. And I do think that this year's group is going to be very interesting to see how they're able to play out. Obviously I look at Demetri Felton. How is he going to play out? Is he going to be more of a running back? Is he going to be more receiver? Where is Donovan Peoples-Jones at in his development? And even Kadril Hodge too. I look at these guys and even some of the undrafted guys that they brought in. I know that they have a lot of talent, at those skill positions. So I'll be keeping an eye out on all of those guys as well.
Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan, as always. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Mac.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always appreciate the time.
All right, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, John Fanta will join us. We also expect to be hearing from Kevin Stefanski as the Browns wrap up day 1 of mandatory minicamp. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org, because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. Day one of mandatory minicamp in Berea in the books. Kevin Stefanski met with the media. The Pro Football Writers Association virtually honored him, gave him his Coach of the Year trophy. He addressed last year briefly and said he's happy with the work the Browns are getting done out in Berea today.
I don't want to talk about 2020, but in this instance, it gives me an opportunity to talk about our players and our coaches. And as everybody knows, I thought they did an outstanding job last year in tough circumstances, and they never blinked. So they made me look good. But I appreciate the recognition for our staff and for our players. With that, I'll just kind of dive into today. I thought it was really good work out there. I mean, absolutely beautiful day on the fields here in Berea. Got a lot of really good work in. The individual drills, the 7-on-7, the team periods. I just thought we covered a lot of ground. We ran a lot of plays. A ton of communication is going on out there, and I was really pleased with the work that we got done. So we got another one tomorrow and then one more on Thursday.
Let's welcome in John Fanta. John, you have to like the way that Kevin Stefanski is always moving forward, not looking back, looking ahead, and trying to complete and duplicate the success and even take it a step further. All right, obviously.
You're right there, Dave. Great to be with you this afternoon. When you think about Kevin Stefanski and everything that he's been able to do, he set the tone. We talked about it last year. He set the tone, and he clearly needs a defense to try to rebuild itself this upcoming season. I thought that what Kevin Stefanski did last year was win under totally unorthodox situations that the league had to deal with across the league. But for a first-year head coach to come in and do what he did with this Cleveland Browns team with a defense that, let's face it, left a lot to be desired at times. You know, you were just talking with Mac about it, and he brought up the fact that you're looking at potentially 8 new defensive starters this upcoming season. I just think you see why the Cleveland Browns are built to be a Super Bowl contender this upcoming season through their leader. It starts in the demeanor that he possesses day in and day out, and we just saw it in his media availability in the last hour.
So, John, the other thing that Browns fans are excited about and should be, Odell Beckham Jr. on the field doing some football drills, just 6.5 months removed from ACL surgery. Here's what Kevin Stefanski had to say about seeing Odell back on the field.
He looked good today. Day one of minicamp, and then we'll progress and make sure that we're having, obviously, dialogue with the player, with the training staff, the medical staff, et cetera.
And, John, it's important to note, didn't want to get too far ahead saying, boy, he's going to be ready for training camp, said we'll take it day to day. But to think about a guy being out there doing football-type drills 6.5 months removed from ACL, it's a testament to Odell that he got after it in his rehab process.
It is a testament to Odell Beckham, and without saying it, I think that Kevin Stefanski made it clear that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be ready to go for training camp. I think that it's safe to assume, and that was discussed among the press in the last hour. There was a question asked of Coach Stefanski, if participating now in OTAs, doesn't that mean that he will be ready for training camp? And Kevin Stefanski said, look, we're focused on today. He gave that coach answer, but you heard it from Jarvis Landry. Now you're hearing it from Kevin Stefanski. Odell Beckham Jr. has been a storyline for the negative throughout the last 8 months. And what I mean by that, Dave Bacon, is when people bring Odell Beckham Jr. up, they say that the Cleveland Browns' success came when OBJ was off the field. And is there something to be made of that? Does that mean that OBJ is not a part of the winning formula? Odell Beckham Jr. won a game for the Cleveland Browns in Dallas that I would argue was the early pivot point of the season, because the Browns nearly unraveled into a same old type of loss, and he got them back into that game and into the win column in that game. So for OBJ, this upcoming training camp and season is about proving that he can be part of the winning equation and add equation. You brought up those PFF, those Pro Football Focus wide receiver duo rankings. Let's call a spade a spade. Odell Beckham Jr. performs to the level that he's capable of, then the Cleveland Browns are going to go, because Jarvis Landry is Mr. Automatic for this team. I look at the potential, but I also look at the fact that OBJ, he's got to have a chip on his shoulder, Dave. He's the guy that people have questioned here since that injury and since the break off. And now people wonder, is he going to add or is he going to be for the negative? Let's see what happens. But I believe that for OBJ to be around winning and to be around Stefanski, the type of leader he is, that things can fall into place here in the right way.
Yeah, I would agree. I think people are Baker taking off and OBJ being off the field, and I don't think the two have I don't think they have anything to do with each other completely. The other thing that Kevin Stefanski addressed was getting things rolling with Baker Mayfield's second year in this system and kind of looking forward to the growth.
Well, I'd tell you, Jake, yes, this is the first time I'm in person with him, but we've been on a lot of Zoom calls together. So throughout the course of this off-season program going all the way back to April, we've installed the offense, we've watched tape together, we've added new plays, talked about old plays. So we have a pretty good feel for where Baker is, really where a bunch of the guys that are returning are. So we have work, we have room to grow, we have work to do. And this was a step today, was a step in that direction.
And John, I think you're going to see a lot of good things because it is the second year that Kevin Stefanski, he understands what he has in Baker Mayfield, and he'll play to his strengths.
Chance this season. Let's look at what Baker Mayfield's career had out in Houston. Look, it didn't work out, and things went down the tube. And then from that to Freddie Kitchens, obviously that chapter. And then you have to win a pandemic, have another coach, a fourth coach added to your professional career. And how to manage games last year, and I do think with a normal up coming year, have an offensive line that's staying together. Football, it's the year. You have running backs that are stacked up in your back for the Browns with Demetric Felton, who is shining right now. And with some of the other options that they have, you know that you've got Chubb, you know that you have Hunt. The Browns have options in their backfield, and they have a plethora of options in their wide receiver core. In fact, they could end up having to have a couple of cuts of guys that could easily be on another NFL roster. So Baker Mayfield has the setup here now with some normalcy. It's a return to normalcy. For Baker Mayfield, that's got to feel incredibly rewarding, because you come off last year where you quite literally are going into your first career playoff game and you don't have the man in Kevin Stefanski on the sidelines, and you prove to the doubters that you can do it. Now you have your coach. You're able to work with OBJ for the first time in off-season activity and leading up into a regular season. You know, for this Cleveland Browns team, it's not about ability. I think for the defense, staying healthy is really important, particularly in the secondary. But for the offense, Dave, it's not about ability or talent. It's about this. You know, the biggest obstacle that's facing the Cleveland Browns on offense is themselves. Just handling the mental place that comes with being a team that's now the hunted every single week, and a team that's going to have to play 17 games. And let's face it, a team that on paper, you know, you want to start your season 1-0, but that's a very daunting task going into Kansas City week 1. It's a task that a lot of teams would look at and think, oh God, I mean, you don't want to start behind the 8 ball here, but look, that's how things are going to start for this team. And if they're able to win in Kansas City, it catapults everything the other way. But the fact is the predictions are going to pour in, and the Chiefs will be projected to win that game. It's a long way from now. But I think for Baker Mayfield, this has to feel rewarding. Heading into this season, it's all in front of him. It really comes down to that mentality and taking on the right approach in that regard, and understanding that, look, he doesn't have to there's only one football. There's only one football. And he's got more than enough weapons to give the ball to, but it could be a different guy on any given Sunday. This team does have the right coach in Stefanski, who can get that mentality across the locker room like we saw last year.
John Fanta and I are going to take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we will talk quickly about the Indians getting ready for Game 2 of their series against the Orioles. Sports4CLE will be right back.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens. Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Sports for CLE continues. Indians trying to make it 2 in a row against the Orioles over at Progressive Field. Made a roster move today. Eli Morgan recalled from AAA and Owen Miller sent down. So Eli Morgan will get his second stint with the Indians, a starter, and the Indians need some arms. Ernie Clement will be making his first start in the major leagues today. He is starting at second base. Cesar Hernandez is going to be the DH in this one tonight. And Cal Quantrill will get the start, and John Fanta, Cal Quantrill, and all these young guys are going to get an opportunity. Terry Francona needs one of these, 1, 2, or 3 of these young starters to take advantage of what's in front of them and step up and go 5-6 innings for them.
Yeah, Terry Francona is going to have to work some of the most magic that he's ever had to be tasked with in his career. Let's face it, you lose 4 of your 5 starting pitchers from the opening day rotation back in April. You're going to have an uphill climb, and that's the thing facing the Indians right now. They have a window here that if Shane Bieber's injury, you knock on what you hope it's not as bad as it could be, in that the Indians have a manageable rest of their month of June. But Aaron Savali, when he's on the rubber, I think he's going to be asked to go 7 innings from a minimum standpoint. And Savali has it in him to go that long. He's got a rubber arm of sorts and can go 7-8 innings in a game. It's why he's been at the top of the league in wins. But I think that where I get concerned is one thing that the Indians have had better than anybody in baseball, or just about that, is their bullpen. It's only June, though. And if you're constantly asking your bullpen to come in right now in the 5th and 6th innings of games, it could bog them down. You know, you do wonder, James Karinchak and Emmanuel Clase have been 2 of the best relievers in baseball. But if they're being called upon every night and 4 outs here, 5 or 6 outs there, I do wonder how sustainable it is. The fact is the Indians are searching for someone, you just said it, 2 or 3 guys to give them distance. Cal Quantrill was part of the Mike Clevenger trade because the thought in mind was he could be a Swiss Army knife type of pitcher. They need him to start showing he can start games and stay in games, and that's got to really get going here tonight because the Indians are in a playoff race. They are in the mix. Does the on-paper talent necessarily look like that always? No, it doesn't. This team is tied with the Orioles with just 161 runs on the season. They're in the bottom 10 of baseball in runs scored, in OPS, in batting average as well. When you combine that with a bullpen having to be tasked with about half the amount of work to get through a game and a rotation right now that when you rely on young arms to begin with, and now you get even younger, it's going to be a tall task here for Quantrill, for J.C. Mejia, who might be coming back and starting this Friday. He might come back on shorter rest and try to go 3 or 4 innings and they'll piece it together. Carl Willis has to be up late right now at night trying to figure out what buttons he and Tito are going to push.
John Fanta, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. That'll do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. Want to remind you, tomorrow's guests, Dennis Maniloff, the D-Man, and Mandy Bell. Day 2 of Brown's mandatory minicamp. We'll have all that stories and some sound from out there as well. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you again tomorrow at 4 o'clock.